The most notorious in recent times, of course, centred around millionaire Jeffrey Epstein. This week we learnt more about the actions of his alleged accomplice. US authorities unsealed Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition from 2016. The documents come from a now settled civil defamation suit against Maxwell by Virginia Giuffre, who accused Maxwell of aiding Epstein in grooming and trafficking her for sex with him and other wealthy, powerful men. To unpack the new information and discuss the Epstein saga, I spoke with Brace Belden, a journalist and co-host of the popular podcast TrueAnon. Brace Belden, thanks for joining Sky News Your World. Now, the deposition documents show Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer quite a few questions. There were many "I don't recall" responses. And at one point, she had a physical outburst that knocked the court reporter's computer off the conference room table. Now, it all sounds intriguing, but what did we actually learn about Ms Maxwell's involvement in the Epstein saga?
Well, we didn't actually learn a ton new. We mostly actually just saw what things look like from her perspective, or rather what her take on everything is. I mean, like you said, she essentially just repeated words back to the prosecutor, or to the opposing attorney, and pretended to not know what like pretty basic words like female meant. One thing that we did see was the repeated mention of a few names that we already knew were involved, and we saw a couple sort of unusual questions. But other than that, we didn't necessarily learn anything more from Maxwell. It sort of just gives us a better picture of the broad whole. Like you know, she wasn't going to give us any new startling revelations or drop any secrets or anything. But it's interesting to see what things look like from her perspective, and it gives us an insight into what her upcoming defense could be for her current court case.
Maxwell said she did hire massage therapists, but denied she hired anyone to have sex with Epstein, and denied introducing Prince Andrew to underage sex partners. Now, these are two crucial elements to Maxwell's connection to the Epstein network, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, from the get-go, one of the most basic things about the whole Epstein saga is that they used essentially code words to mean sex. Massage in their world means like one-to-one sex. There's no like sort of blurry gray area there. You know, is it a massage with something extra? No, it means literally sex, oftentimes not even a massage. The other thing, dealing with Andrew as well, I mean, the Prince Andrew thing, as I'm sure everyone knows, they have not done a great job of convincing the public that that's not true. But the fact of the matter, in this deposition, the case of the puppet is brought up. And now the puppet, for those who don't know, Ghislaine Maxwell actually gifted Prince Andrew a copy of a puppet from the television show Spitting Image. If you Google Prince Andrew Spitting Image, you'll see the puppet. It is horrible. And he actually used that in, unfortunately, some of the things that he did. And so this is corroborated by two different women that were, at the time, young girls. And essentially by Prince Andrew himself in his insane BBC interview. It'll be interesting to see if there's any more fallout from that, although I kind of doubt it.
And Brace, Ghislaine Maxwell has a very interesting past, doesn't she? She's a prominent philanthropist. She's the daughter of notorious UK media mogul Robert Maxwell. And in the deposition, she was asked if she was Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. She responded by saying, quote, "That's a tricky question." How would you describe her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, you know, actually, she's not wrong about that. That is a tricky question. Epstein did scoop her up sort of into a what you might call like a traditional boyfriend-girlfriend relationship right after she arrived in New York in the early 90s after her father's death. After that, it became more of like a, well, I don't want to call them swingers, but they were something rather than the actual boyfriend-girlfriend kind of traditional thing you'd recognize. And then at the later points, and really like the relationship we most recognize, the one we most see brought up during sort of the Epstein saga or whatever, is her role essentially as both of his employee, as his lover, and as co-conspirator. And people often called him or her his procurer as well, which to an extent, yeah, that's very true.
And now I'd like to dive into some of the more sinister and perhaps speculative aspects of the Epstein conspiracy. You are among the many Epstein researchers who suggest intelligence agencies may have been involved in Epstein's network. Can you elaborate on that and describe the evidence that suggests that?
Well, I know that a lot of people, whenever there's like a tremendous crime of any nature, whether it's violent or sexual or whatever, I think sort of understandably want to be like, well, the hand of intelligence agencies is in this. Uh, in the case of the Epstein, nexus or whatever, it's pretty clear that the intelligence agencies are not only swirling around this whole scene of people, this whole group of people, even specifically the duo of Ghislaine and Epstein, but they're actually in that. I mean, Epstein spent a lot of the 90s and early 2000s bragging that his job was as a sort of financial bagman for the CIA. Ghislaine talks about shooting rockets from Black Hawk helicopters at Colombian rebels in the jungle. And the fact of the matter is, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was one of the most famous, if not the most famous, Israeli spies in world history. I mean, he worked as a spy for a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, he was buried with honors in Israel. In the deposition, Ghislaine is asked two different questions. Well, really two questions asked in several different ways. She's asked if Epstein worked for the CIA and if he worked for Israeli intelligence, which is often shorthand people call it Mossad, although there's several different agencies. She, of course, sensibly doesn't answer. I don't know, and anybody I think who's claiming to is maybe not, shouldn't be as confident as they might sound. I don't know if Epstein got a paycheck each month from Langley or from Tel Aviv, but I do know that what Epstein engaged in, which is getting powerful people to engage in sex acts with, let's say, subjects that they might be embarrassing if it got out, inside of houses and on islands, inside of airplanes that are totally wired up with cameras, which we do know that's not a conspiracy or theory or anything. Epstein was crazy about security systems. That is generally known as a honeypot, which is one of the oldest sort of intelligence tricks in the books. And I'll be honest with you, if the CIA wasn't using Epstein, then, I mean, they don't really know what they're doing.
It really is a fascinating and disturbing saga. As someone who has been tracking it so closely for so long, what do you find particularly striking about it all?
I think just the breadth of it, and like, if you go through his black book, and not every name, some people in the black book were just names he collected, but a lot of people weren't. If you go through this, and if you go through old pictures, of who Ghislaine is hanging out with, not just like taking pictures at the parties, but like who's at the parties at her house, you really see just such a it's an illuminating cross section of the bourgeoisie, of the international bourgeoisie, and really, these people essentially had unfettered access to whatever they wanted, totally, access to basically any person, any place, anything they wanted, and essentially no punishments ever. And I mean, we'll see what actually happens with Ghislaine's court case. I'm not holding out good hopes.